was 26 years old. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a movie theater getting high.
I was an outcast my whole life, like I didn't know where I belonged.
Knocking my head against the wall over and over and over again.
So I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I heard a message that made my ears pop.
People who I can relate to and identify with. Managed to heal relationships, start families, and be happy with life.
Drug problem? We can help. We've been there. Narcotics Anonymous.
Do you know someone, or are you personally battling a drug and alcohol addiction? Why are so many people addicted today? And why have so many people died as a direct result of this disease? If you've been affected by this problem and want answers like we do, then join us in our efforts to face this disease. Our purpose is to examine the truths, expose the lies, and uncover and provide resources to this affliction. Come, join us in this journey.
Many people have been touched by addiction, either directly or indirectly. Join us as we educate and break the stigma associated with addiction. Together, we can start a revolution and bring the disease out of the darkness and into the light.
I was 26 years old. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a movie theater getting high.
I was an outcast my whole life, like I didn't know where I belonged.
Knocking my head against the wall over and over and over again.
So I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I heard a message that made my ears pop.
People who I can relate to and identify with. Managed to heal relationships, start families, and be happy with life.
Drug problem? We can help. We've been there. Narcotics Anonymous.
Today on Addiction and Recovery TV, we have a special presentation in regards to the history and foundation of a 12-step fellowship known as Narcotics Anonymous. We'll also learn how this program was derived from the original fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous. Please note that these individuals have shared this information all over the world, and we are excited today to share this with you. Enjoy this episode.
In the same office in New York, there's a secretary named Bobby B., and her correspondence is very different. She describes alcoholics and addicts as being more similar than different. She says, "Who are we to criticize others who may view something else? We are much the same. Underneath it all, are we really so different?" And part of what we've come to learn is that she died in the early 50s following a relapse on pills. So it sounds like her dual addiction to alcohol and pills created greater empathy towards addicts, and she did a lot of correspondence with people in Addicts Anonymous. There was a woman in Montreal in 1954 who starts a New York version of NA there named Lynn A. She's writing to Bill in 1957, and she makes an argument for a program that is inclusive of all drugs, including alcohol, pointing out that an alcohol addict is still an addict. Bill's not really on board with this, so in a follow-up letter, Lynn writes, "This is what I'm truly trying to get across to you. Basically, the problem is the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that alcoholism is addiction to alcohol. It is addiction that is a problem, not the chemical or the drug that the person is addicted to."
So in 1957, she nails it.
There's another person that's important to introduce by the name of Betty T. She gets into recovery. Her recovery date is December 11th, the same day as Bill W.'s, just 15 years later. She had a history of alcohol and drug addiction. She went to the narcotic farm in Lexington, left there in 1950, and goes back to Los Angeles. She becomes really active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the things that's happening in the 50s is, where should the addict go to recover? And so her solution and her belief is that the addict needs to come into Alcoholics Anonymous, whereas Danny C. is really saying addicts need to have their own groups. And she starts a special closed meeting at her home for AA members who had the dual problem of alcohol and other drug addiction. She writes to Bill. She's aware of Danny C. in New York. She doesn't support what he's doing. After a period of time, this is creating tension for Bill W. People are complaining about this. And you start seeing by 1957 the correspondence with Betty T. is getting pretty tense. Bill is critical of Betty recommending that drug addicts attend AA meetings. He says, personally, I'd feel glad that drug addicts seem free to go to open AA meetings, but I doubt it would be wise to encourage them to think they can actually become Alcoholics Anonymous members. In some spots, we've even had violent opposition to drug addicts attending AA open meetings. And so what Bill ends up saying is that he's going to kind of make a stand on this issue. And in February of 1958, in that issue of the Grapevine, he publishes the article, Problems Other Than Alcohol, What Can Be Done About Them. You can still find the pamphlet on meeting tables. And Bill concludes that we must accept the fact that no non-alcoholic, whatever his affliction, can be converted into an alcoholic AA member. And so what Bill's doing at that point is really creating that singleness of purpose to make sure that AA continues to exist for the person seeking recovery from alcoholism. And at the same time, this kind of draws a line that reinforces the need for persons not addicted to alcohol, addicted to something else, to get their own supports.
So another significant event here is the beginnings of the NA as we know it today is that February 7th, 1950, Jimmy K gets sober. Woohoo! Yeah. You guys have been really great. Y'all sat through an hour of this presentation so far. We've only got 30 more minutes left, so, we're on our home stretch, guys. Hold on. Anyway, back at the North Hollywood Clubhouse where Jimmy was very much a member, a lot of the folks there, they were aware that people were coming to that people that were addicted to, opiates mainly, were coming, and they really couldn't identify with the folks in AA, and so they'd sit around this picnic table in the back of the clubhouse, and they'd pontificate on what can we really do about this. And we're going to listen to Jimmy tell you a little bit about that right now.
And just for kind of context, Jimmy is considered to be one of the founding members, if not the founder, of Narcotics Anonymous as it's known today.
We started long before NA was a reality, even in name. We grew from a need. And we found, those of us who were members had come into AA and found that we could recover from AA. We found out that many addicts were still going down the road of degradation and death. And we thought it was right that we should try to do something.
And so we know that Jimmy actually had contact with the Danny C. of New York, because in a 1984 interview, there's a man named Gene H. who was interviewing Jimmy K. And Jimmy was talking about how he had written Danny and gotten the letter back, but he couldn't find it anywhere. And Gene was saying, oh, there's Dorothy down the road, blah, blah, blah. She's trying to get in touch with you because she has a letter to give you that she received from Danny. And interesting enough, I don't know how the history, God's work and everything, but we were able to come across this letter right here. And it predates the creation of NA on the West Coast. It was actually, Dorothy had to write Danny sometime during the fall of 51. And because Danny's writing back in January of 52. So we do know that there was contact established between New York and LA and the West Coast. And here we've got an early reference. Now, as you know, as I've spoke a couple of times here, we generally accept, or NA generally accepts, July of 1953 as their start date. But in 1952, in a book called The Narcotics Menace, which is they talk about a group meeting in Los Angeles, and it's actually for the creation of a hospital that members of Narcotics Anonymous and also of Addicts Anonymous show up. And this book was published in 1952, so it had to be written, sometime either during 52 or 51. So this gives us a little indication that something was going on before the official start date of July 53.
And these old books are fascinating. You open them up and they have an actual picture of a narcotic menace. You guys want to see?
So we got some earlier references here. In July of 1952, a man named Jack P. writes to Bill W. And he says, Bill, I've been asked by the Sheriff's Department to bring an NA meeting into the women's jail. Do you have any information on what I can talk about? Because I'm a straight AA guy. I don't really know what to talk about for addicts. And Bill writes back, actually, and just says, no, contact Lexington, Kentucky. But the NA Board of Trustees had a meeting with Jack P. in 86. And in this interview with Jack says that he actually started a meeting in June of 1953 on Moore Road for addicts, and that in July of 53, Jimmy K comes. Jimmy K was his buddy. Some people have said that Jack P was actually Jimmy's sponsor. Some other people have said a man named Eddie C is. We don't really know for sure. But anyway, he takes Jimmy to this meeting, and Jimmy takes over the leadership of this no-name group. So this is where we speculate right here that the July of 1953, the NA start date comes from. But what we do know, what Chris and I do know, is that on August 17th, a month and a half later of 1953, there are 6 organizational meetings that start with members from AA who have dual problems, who really want to get something going for the addict that can't identify. And so this becomes actually, Narcotics Anonymous as we know it today. Now, they start out by saying they want to create the name Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous of San Fernando Valley. That's what they want to call themselves. And the story goes that Jimmy says, I don't know that that's such a good idea. But somebody gets in touch with AA, and AA says, no, you can't use our name, but you can use our steps. So here on September 14th, 1953, we see the actual very first written documentation of Narcotics Anonymous starting. And it says San Fernando Valley AANA is changed to Narcotics Anonymous. And after 7 organizational meetings, and I apologize, I said there were 6, there's actually 7. On October the 5th, 1953, this is the very first day that a meeting for a recovery meeting is open for business that NA today starts. And
we made reference to our purpose from the key that came out of the Addicts Anonymous group, and we see this here in Jimmy discussing it.
We started long before NA was a reality, even in name. We grew from a need. We grew from a need that we found, those of us who were members had come into AA and found that we could recover in AA. We found out that many addicts were still going down the road of degradation and death. We thought it was right that we should try to do something.
And the stakes were high at the time. You could be arrested for internal possession. Internal possession meant that you didn't have any drugs on you or paraphernalia, simply that you had track marks. You could be arrested for being with another known addict. So NA is taking root in very hostile soil, just as it was with Danny on the East Coast. However, Jimmy decided to do something different, which was to go directly to the police and try to talk with them. We know that there was police surveillance at early NA meetings. This guy talks about it, seeing officers standing outside the meeting, making remarks. We see you, you're making a fix, we'll get you. You don't do it this time, we'll get you again. And he said that the meeting space had to be changed because of such harassment. Another significant event becomes NA creating their first piece of literature. And why it was significant is there was a lot of debate over how Step 1 should read. The previous attempts simply changed alcohol in Step 1 to drugs or narcotics. And Jimmy prevailed in getting the word addiction inserted into the first step. And so we see, we admitted we were powerless over addiction. And this is the first time that a mutual aid group made Step 1 about a condition as opposed to a specific substance, which was pretty forward thinking because, again, 95% of the people coming into NA at the time had heroin addiction. Just like AA kind of had some rough starts and they had to kind of find their way out. NA didn't quite look like NA does today in the 50s. There was a guy named Cy M. who assumed leadership of Narcotics Anonymous, and Jimmy distanced himself because they were not following the 12 traditions. They made amendments to the bylaws to expand who could speak at their meetings to include alcoholics and non-users. They got involved with issues. There's a newspaper article that talks about them getting involved with trying to provide solutions to the drug problem. And we see kind of Tradition 6 and Tradition 10 issues by recommending, we as Narcotics Anonymous members recommend that you install a nationwide network of narcotics clinics where drugs could be administered for free. We as Narcotics Anonymous want to introduce into the public schools a realistic course in narcotics to, quote, scare the hell out of them. We of Narcotics Anonymous have our rent paid for by somebody outside of the fellowship who also provides the refreshments. And so these are some of the things. There are also kind of Tradition 3 issues going on at the time where a person was allowed to come to their first meeting high, but subsequently could not attend if he'd used a drug of any kind. I'm going to skip this just in the interest of time.
All right.
So in November of 59, Narcotics Anonymous almost dies.
When he had trouble, I think that got to Cy. And then when some of the other people started to refuse to go to the meetings, that got to him. And I think he began to realize that something was wrong, And that, of course, is what Pepe and Scott and others have verified for us since, that they were not living up to the tradition. And it was just kind of a mess. So finally, around November, I think it was just the beginning of November in 59, Cy called me up and asked me if I was going to go to the meeting. And I said, yeah. He said, okay, I'll see you over there. So I went over, and by that time there was only maybe 4 or 5 people coming to meetings all together, Walked over there, and he said, here are the keys to the church. He said, would you open up from now on and take care of things? I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, well, I got to go on location on a job, and I won't be able to do it anymore,
So Jimmy and Sylvia restarted NA in this place right here. It's a Unitarian church on Moores and Roe Park in early 1960, and Jimmy was so insistent on following the traditions that the only reading was this tradition right here. I mean, that was it. It goes on, and so here they are right here, and Jimmy was adamant about it. Then in 61 or 62, which the Little White Book is published, they called it Hip Pocket Recovery, but this is the first publication of the 12 traditions for NA. And so, Jimmy is definitely pushing the traditions. And he pretty much, that and his changing of the word addiction and the insistence on the traditions are Jimmy's 10 strikes, so to speak, using a bowling metaphor. But in 2016, we see that there are over 63 weekly meetings of NA in 129 countries around the world. Literature has been translated into 41 different languages. And we're going to give you a little bit of what's gotten NA there.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have to go back to what we started with in 1953 when we first sat down to try to put something together to help addicts. You and I are going to have to live the steps the way we do, and we're going to have to follow the traditions all the way, because we've died because the traditions have not been lived up to, and you know it as well as I do. She says, yeah. I said, are you willing? I got to have a program. I can't go to AA. I can't make it in AA. I said, neither can a lot of people. I said, okay, let's start all over again then. We'll still call it Narcotics Anonymous, and we'll try to live up to the things.
here today, and what will you take away from this event?
Well, I think it's great that everybody understands that addiction is a real problem, and it can be arrested and you can recover. And the message that we need to get out to people is hope. There's a lot of people that don't believe that they can recover and get well. And when we look at young people today, they have no idea. They're struggling hard with addiction like never before, and they ODing and dying, and they just don't believe in themselves. And we need to come to a place where we deliver a message to them that they can be restored inside. It's not what we look like on the outside. I think too many of us get caught up on, when we get recovery, what we look like on the outside. But our insides are not well, and we need to help these young people and anybody that's struggling with addiction get well on the inside and get whole.
And that's awesome, talking about an inside job, right? And so I just want to thank you and mention again about that you yourself have been involved in recovery, and it's okay. You've been open about that, and so the support that you give to others with recovery. But today we were talking a lot about the addiction component, and so we hear that the phrase disease of addiction. And so what is your comments of that phrase, like really getting out there and people hearing that addiction is a disease?
Well, it's about time. It should have been out there a long time ago that it's a disease. It's an illness of the mind that affects a person and controls a person's life, and it takes people to places that they can never imagine. I don't care if you come from Park Bench to Beverly Hills. Addiction will ruin your life, and whoever you are. It doesn't matter if you're successful, famous, baseball player, or whatever. There's a real issue that's going on inside with someone that's caught up in the midst of addiction, and if you can ever get to the root problem of that, then they can eventually find recovery, and that's the most important statement I bring about to people. Recovery is real, and you can live an abundant life if you just set your mind to doing some real work on yourself and dealing with the issues that you have, and you can become a whole new person.
At Addiction and Recovery TV, we talk about raising awareness, and we also talk about the problems and situations revolving around addiction and recovery. And it's always important to remember that if you struggle in an area and you're looking for help or resources, there are plenty available. And sometimes it just takes picking up the phone and making one simple phone call that can make all the difference. So remember, we're always available, and we're ready to help you in any way that we know possible, and definitely lead you in the right direction, because along the pathway of darkness there is a light of hope along those roads. So hopefully you will be open to see the light and walk in that direction. So if it's mental health, if it's addiction, even suicide, the help is always readily available. Just take that initiative to reach out and receive it.
I was 26 years old. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a movie theater getting high.
I was an outcast my whole life, you know, like I didn't know where I belonged.
Knocking my head against the wall over and over and over again.
So I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I heard a message that made my ears pop.
People who I can relate to and identify with. Managed to heal relationships, start families, and be happy with life.
Drug problem? We can help. We've been there. Narcotics Anonymous.
Addiction and recovery is a serious topic. While doing this show, we're hoping that we spark an interest not only for members who may have struggled themselves with addiction and recovery, but also people who are just not really well informed about the topic. Because why today are so many people suffering from this affliction, yet we're not really making the progress that we should be making? In times before, we've thought of addiction as a bad habit, or just bad people use bad drugs. Today we're realizing more than ever that it's not just about having a bad habit or being a bad person, that it's an illness, a sickness, that if not treated, people will die and family members are left behind suffering. But some of the questions that we still need to ask on this program are, why is it that people are so lost? What makes someone turn to drugs in spite of everything else? We've had some guests on our program who've talked about this and even answered the question in so many words by saying that we're not united, that love is missing, and people are indeed in search of their own true identity. So how is society addressing this issue? If we even are we providing truth to individuals? Are we helping people to find themselves in a world full of so many options? Well, at Addiction and Recovery TV, we would like to help you in this search, even if it's just by letting you know that you're important and that you mean something and that your life has worth and value.
I think that addiction is a family disease, so we need to educate and support families and let them be aware that help is possible for their loved ones. We realize that it's a difficult thing to admit, but we want to support people in education, not only, group type sessions where people can talk, but even events where people can go to and kind of commingle with other people that suffer from the same